Everybody, it's Andy here from LuxpowerTek Cape Town. Welcome. It's just gone 10 o'clock, and we have 23 participants here for the SNA training for today. I have muted all of the participants, so if you want to ask a question, please use the chat facility, or alternatively, you can unmute yourself to ask a question or make a comment, but then just mute yourself again immediately after that. Okay, so the purpose of this, first of all, welcome everybody and thank you very much for attending. And the purpose of today's training and the ongoing training will be to bring everybody up to speed with new developments, or just to run a refresher on any previous training that's taken place. All right, so for this particular training today, I have, let me just see if I can, I have a station, and I'm sharing my screen. This particular station is my personal one, so I don't mind, it being viewed, and also there's no there is no permissions required. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight ahead to the maintenance page so that we can start here. Okay, so for those of you, I know that in the group of 22 or 25 participants that we have now, we have very experienced installers and tech support guys. So please bear with me if I go through these repetitively, but it's for the benefit of everyone. I think the meeting is being recorded as well. Right, so you will notice here on the top, once you've selected the station, before you can do any changes, you have to click the read button. And the read button basically triggers your device that you're working on to connect with the server. And in this case, the server is the Africa server, which is based in Germany. It will then trigger the server to contact this machine and extract all of the data off the machine and then populate the page. So you can see that the data is now being populated. So typically, if you hold your mouse or your cursor over the read button, if it is a pointed hand like that, then it means that the reading has all been done. If I click read again, you'll see that the cursor turns to a no entry sign. It means that it is busy collecting the data. Okay, so now the data is being collected, and once it turns back to a hand, it means that the page is fully populated. So for those of you who are new here, remember that this is the most important and first step that you need to do in maintenance, is always read first. Don't hop into the settings and do setting changes, because there's no link between your device that you're working on, and when I say device that you're working on, meaning your computer, and the remote machine that you are trying to locate. So we complete the triangle. The triangle is the remote machine, the server, and you. All right, so click this. By doing this, the population is done. Right, so on the common settings here, the time, even though it's got a set button here, you must remember that this time that it is displayed here is the time that the dongle reports based on when you establish the station. When you set it, you would have set the station under the registration tab. You would have you would have told the server where the machine is located and what GMT time it is. So this is basically the GMT time extracted from the server that when the dongle was registered. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to discuss today, we're going to talk about some new features that we have, and we're also going to talk about some common questions that come in on a daily basis through our Tech Support Center. We have a large community of support guys that are working in all four community groups. So we have Tech Support 1, the Technical 1, Technical 2, and then we also have the DIY support group, and that's obviously for the DIYers. This training is aimed particularly at installer and distributor level. So on my page, you will see features. If you look at the menu on the side here, you'll see some extra things that we have. But don't worry about if you see some features displayed here that are not on yours, because obviously the depending on which level of support we give the access to these things are slightly different. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about, and it's probably one of our most common points that we have. It's the neutral and PE one here, neutral and potential earth bonding. Okay, so neutral earth bonding. Here we are talking about the bonding between the neutral output of the machine and the potential earth. So not on the AC incoming side, but on the EPS out or the AC outside. That is the bonding that we're referring to here. Some of you would have noticed that there's a neutral potential earth bond here, enable or disable. This is simply a feature that has been added for something that is coming up in the future in the 6 kilowatt SNA. So the current version of the 5 kilowatt SNAs that we have, they do not have a bonding relay built in. You still have to do your bonding manually, and it is a SANS requirement that you do the bonding. How will you know? Is if you put your machine into off-grid mode and you measure the voltage between, or the potential difference in AC voltage between the neutral and the potential earth, you should get 0. If you have an elevated voltage of 95 or 115 volts, it simply means that your bonding is incomplete. So you can bond. There are 2 ways of bonding it, and there are also 2 schools of thought about bonding. Some guys prefer to have a mechanical bond, meaning that when the grid is on, they have a relay, and the relay, when it's energized, there is no bond, because the machine is now having, the output is a pass-through current. So they don't do the bonding, and then the minute the grid falls away, or we go to what's typically known in this country as load shedding, then the relay will engage and bond the neutral and earth. So like I said, there are 2 schools of thought about this. The SANS code doesn't specify what you have to do. It just says that any generator must have neutral earth bonding. And the reason we do this is for safety, because you could have the threat or the possibility of electrocution. Not terminal electrocution, but you could have clients complaining that, for instance, when they touch a tap or when they have a shower, because the bonding on the copper piping is not done correctly, they might pick up a voltage on the earth. So it's important that you do the neutral earth bonding. And the neutral earth bonding can be done by a simple jumper, a jumper cable between, or a bond between the neutral and earth. And it also depends on your level and your the neatness of work. Some guys do the jumper on the machine itself, or they will do it at a bonding point. But the SANS code is very, very particular about notification. So we recommend that you follow the SANS code with regards to neutral earth bonding. In other words, putting it in an enclosure and marking it as a neutral earth bond. Right, so that's, so to reiterate or go back, this particular feature here is not active at the moment. It's only working on the new 6 kilowatt that is coming out. Right, so I'm going to go back up to the top here. So we spoke about the time. The time is something that you can't, if I change this time here and I set it, it will accept it. But the minute the inverter gets the reading back from the dongle again, it will revert the dongle time here. So if you find that your machine is displaying the wrong time, you can simply go to the station here, and you can edit the station, and here you can do the time zone. South Africa, you see I've selected the continent is Africa, the region is Southern Africa. This should actually read Southern Africa. And then the country is South Africa, and the GMT time zone is +2. But if you have all of this correct, then it should be fine. And also remember, if you elect to enable daylight saving, then our server will check with GMT time when that this particular country switches their time, and it will change the time of your dongle or your station automatically. But please make sure for South Africa, we do not have the benefit of daylight saving. Make sure that your daylight saving time is disabled and that you select GMT +2 here and also put in the correct region. Okay. Let's go back to the maintenance. Okay, so here we have that displayed, the machine serial numbers displayed here, as well as the current firmware code that is grayed out. On the model type here, I've selected, because this particular station has a power gem, so we have lithium, and we've selected number 1 for the high-NA battery. So for those of you guys that are doing new installations on SNAs, and you're going to use a high-NA battery, I'm going to use this one as example number 1. Out of the box, the the SNA will have the firmware that was installed on it at the time it was built in at our facility in Shenzhen. So what you need to do is, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to your maintenance page. You're going to come down here to remote update once the installation is done. And you simply check this station box here. When you check the box, it'll automatically populate this part here with the station that you were last viewing. In other words, if I am an installer or a distributor and I want to work on this particular station, I will either search for it here, or I will go to the config section, and here I'll put in the station name, and you don't have to type out, you need to know the first few letters. It'll bring up everything like that. You can then click on it and click on the inverter, and now it'll bring you to the maintenance tab. The monitor tab of this particular machine. So this is the one that I'm working on. If I go to the maintenance tab here, and I go to remote updates, and I check this box, it will automatically populate this tab here with this machine, right? So now you can see, with the station. So now you can see that there is the serial number, and you can confirm it with the client. There is the dongle, and it also shows the current firmware version. It shows that the dongle is connected. And then here we have an update button, and we have a standard update button. Okay, so we're not going to do any of these. The first thing that I want to do is I want to click this blue question mark here. So the blue question mark will then bring down another window. It'll give me the serial number. It'll tell me what the current firmware code is, and then it will suggest any updates here. This particular machine is up to date, but if it was not up to date, we would have some recommendations here. Sometimes it could be 2, sometimes it could be even up to 4. All you do then is you're going to click the standard update button. But before you do that, we strongly suggest that you contact your client if you're not on site. In other words, if you're going to do this remotely, contact the client, and if they have a changeover switch installed, then ask them to set the changeover to the grid position. And obviously, there has to be grid power. Especially if it's an on-grid or grid-tied system, they have to have grid power, and the reason we elect to do this is so that the Wi-Fi is constant or uninterrupted. And then the other reason also is if I had 1 or 2 updates here, it will download the update. If I click standard updates, it's going to download the update. Let's go to update record. It will download first, and then once the updates are downloaded, it then onto the machine. It will then upload onto the chipset, and once it's updated, it will switch the machine off, and the machine will power back on again. So there will be a power interruption. In today's day and age, we have a lot of clients that rely on their SNAs to be a UPS because they work from home. So that you might have a client on a Zoom call, you might have a client that's uploading or downloading data. So it's critical that you advise your customers first that you're going to do an update, because it will restart the machine. I know of some installers that run their updates at night when they typically know their client is sleeping, but that's a personal choice. and a decision that you have to make yourself. But we always advocate advising the client first to do the update, that you're going to do the update and there will be power interruptions. They momentary updates, they normally last a couple of seconds before the power is restored. Okay, so the first thing you do is once the new machine has been installed, you update the firmware, you bring the firmware to the latest version. Remember earlier on, we were talking about the battery, and in this particular station, we're using a high-NA battery. So when you install a high-NA battery with an SNA that has not been updated, you have to select either brand 2 or brand 6, being the Lux protocol. Those are the only two protocols that will work with a high-NA. As a matter of fact, high-NA will work on Dynas protocol as well, but it's most accurate on this one, on brand 6. If you're doing a new installation with a power gem or a high 5, and you haven't updated the inverter yet, then run it on the Lux protocol. Then once you've done the firmware update to the latest version, you can then change the battery. Now, remote updates for the battery can only be done when the machine is not functioning or not using the battery. So typically you can do it, you can either do it on the machine itself where you can set the battery. It's going to do a hard reset on the machine. But if the machine is recharging the battery or discharging the battery, then it will not allow you, it will give you an operation failed error code 3. It won't allow you to change the battery because the battery is currently being charged or discharged. What you then have to do is either, if you're on site, put the change over to the grid position, or you can do it on the machine itself. But if it's a remote battery change, then you have to ask the client to put the change over into the grid position, wait for the Wi-Fi to be stable, and then you're going to put your machine in standby mode here. And this is very particular, especially for our LXP models. It won't allow you to do it. So you can set this to standby. Bring the machine in standby mode means that all functions are ceased. It will stop with the PV harvesting. It'll stop battery charging. It literally just stands there and waits for an instruction. Once it's in standby, you can then go to your battery list and you can select the battery that you've got. And in our case, it's obviously a high-NA. You will select it, and then you can go here, use set model button. Okay, so once you click set model, it will then switch the inverter off and power it back on again. I particularly like, if I'm doing an installation or I'm helping an installer with an installation, and we have a battery like the high-NA, for instance, and we've done the firmware update, I like to power the machine on with AC first. In other words, I put the grid incoming on first, and I leave the battery switched off, physically switched off. So the battery is physically off, the breakers are, or the fuses are off, and the battery's not powered on. Then I go into the inverter and I set the battery on the screen by pressing and holding the enter button for 4 seconds, waiting for the spanner to appear next to the block with the numbers in it, going up to number 3, setting menu 3, enter, and then you select lithium, lead acid, or no battery. Obviously, in this case, you're going to select lithium, and then I select the lithium battery by the number. So on screen, you don't physically see the brands, but you will see these numbers, and then you can select number 8 for Dynas, number 6 for Lux, for high-NA, or number 1 if you've updated the firmware. And then once I've set that, and the inverter will switch off and it'll switch back on again, then I power on the battery. And the particular reason I do that is because when a battery powers on, there is an inrush of DC current. So it's just an extra precautionary step that I like to use. It's a personal preference, and it prevents an inrush current damaging the machine in any way. All right, so we've gone through these two. So, and the same will go for your other batteries, like popular batteries that are being sold today is the Volta, the Dynas, the BX51100, the D5L. D5L is the only one in the Dynas range that is suitable for 1C discharge, especially with the SNA. Because as you know, the SNA, it's rated as a 5 kilowatt inverter or 5 kVA. but it can punch much higher than its listed weight. In other words, if you gave it 10 kilowatts of battery with a 1C rating and you ran a 6 kilowatt load, it will facilitate that until it cuts out, either with temperature or whatever the case may be. So just remember that whenever you're installing an SNA, make sure that the battery that you put in is suitable for this inverter. We have a number of clients who are running SNAs, and it's basically just on a budgetary question. They are running SNAs with a Dynas B3. Now remember that a Dynas B3 is a 48 volt, 75 amp hour battery. So if we do the calculations, we do the simple power calculation of 48 times 75, that gives us a 3.6 kilowatt hour battery, right? So to calculate your capacity of the battery, you multiply the nominal voltage by the rated current. So B3 is 48 volts multiplied by 75 amp hours. 75 amps, it gives us a 33.6 kilowatt hour battery. But remember that the B3, the old B4850 and the B3, the A48100 and the BX5100 are not 1C batteries. They're 0.5C max continuous. So on a B3, for instance, we're going 3.6 times 0.5. That gives us 1.8 kilowatts of max continuous discharge power. Do you see the problem here? The problem now is that you're sitting with a 5 kilowatt inverter and a battery that can only really run at 1.8 kilowatts. And typically what will happen there is if you have spike load, then it will set the battery into alarm, right? And it'll cut the EPS of the inverter, and you will have calls from your client. So it's always advisable to advise clients, using the word advise twice. It's advisable to give your clients advice about their battery selection. And the battery selection is critical because it's that your client, at the time they're asking you to do the installation, they will promise you that it's simply a UPS, and I just literally want to keep one fridge running and one light and my router and my TV. That's it. I promise you I'm not going to draw more than 800 or 900 watts. But eventually, as you know, not all of the occupants of the home are aware of this, and somebody will invariably plug in an iron or a toaster or a hairdryer or something, and the inrush current will trip, that sets the battery into alarm. So always when you're speccing an installation with an SNA, remember this inverter is not tolerant to weak batteries. You can override your battery. For instance, if you've put in an A48100 or a BX51 or any other brand that runs on a 0.5C, you can set it to lead acid. So lead acid then means that the inverter will demand power from the battery regardless. So it will exceed that 0.5C rating. But the risk there is damage to the battery. Over discharging batteries will cause serious damage to the cells. We've seen them come in with swollen cells. So bear that in mind when you do your installation. Okay, green function, enable or disable. It should be disabled. And this particular function here is when you're doing an SNA installation at a holiday home, or you're doing it in an installation where there's not much power drawn and the client wants to save, they want the system to hibernate should power drop below a certain value. So here the default is 60 watts. If you want to know what the function does, you simply just hover your mouse over the blue question mark. And here it explains to us that if you enable green function, if the EPS load, in other words, the load going out of the EPS is lower than 60 watts for more than 10 minutes, then it will cut the EPS. Very important. So if you have a holiday home with a fridge and it's got stuff in the freezer like meats and things like that, and you enable this, and for some reason the load demand is less than 60 watts for 10 minutes, it will cut the EPS output, okay? And you will not be a very popular person then. Okay, so that explains that function. The battery eco function is also a function that we've put in for battery saving. So if you enable it, when the battery reaches an on-grid end of discharge value and the AC charge is disabled, then the inverter will switch to bypass mode, which means it will not use the battery. It will simply take power from grid all the time. And the only way that it will override that is when this inverter goes to off-grid mode and it needs to run off battery, okay? And you must also note that when you select this function, when you enable this, this one here, when you enable it, that your switching time will then be 15 milliseconds. Well, it's rated 15 milliseconds, it could be longer. We've already discussed the normal and the standby feature. And this particular one here we use for when we are doing especially battery changes. Right, you can also force restart your inverter by pressing this button here. And that will simply just switch it off and power it back on again. You must remember that any inverter that's in standby mode or any function, you can cancel that by simply restarting the inverter here. All right, buzzer enabled. Your inverter is fitted with a little board-mounted buzzer, and it's the same one that does the beeping. So you can enable it or disable it, and this will simply make the inverter silent or not. All right, and then the ISO enabling here. This is for the PV structure. So if you enable this, then it will give you it will enable the PV ground fault interrupter. So in other words, if you have DC shorting to earth, because you must remember that a proper installation that is properly earthed means that you could have DC injection coming down onto your start point and invariably onto the inverter. So if you enable this, it will disrupt, or the machine will go into alarm if it picks up DC injection on the earth line. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to be talking specifically. I'm going to go through the chat, see if there are any particular questions that have been asked here, so that we don't. Okay, so all right, so I'm going to go to the first one. So the first question that we got was from Elliot. Elliot wants to know, it will restart the inverter through the process of updating. Question: settings are kept? Yes, the settings are kept. The only time that the settings are not kept is if you update or you change the model of the battery. For instance, if I go to, let me just move this out of the way. If I go to here and I change this to a Dynas battery, then my AC charge function will go to 0 and my discharge will default 20, 15, and 15. When you change the battery, always make sure that you go down the AC charge function and enable it again. Set your AC charge times, and also here on your end of discharge, you need to make sure that you set your EOD for the particular battery type. Elliot, I hope that answers your question. The next question we're going to go to is Johannes. Johannes says, if the battery is not on the list, would it create an issue? I can hear some giggling in the background there. Johannes, you know, with the situation in South Africa with Eskom, we have seen a massive influx of manufacturers of solar panels, especially batteries and inverters. Now, you must remember that not every battery is a OEM manufacturer. So I will give you an example. For instance, if you look on the list here, so all of these people that are on the list, we have, or when I say we, LuxPower has collaborations with these manufacturers. It means that we have shared our protocol with them and they have shared their protocol with us, and we have tested it and it makes the list. So HANA is obviously the #1 choice because of their collaboration with LuxPower, and we will go through that in a different training session. And then under this protocol here, it's the pylon protocol. And the reason why there are so many manufacturers under this particular protocol, we actually have more in here because Volta is in here as well, is because a lot of them use the pylon protocol on their BMS. So they fit squarely in here. So some installers will tell you, yes, I've bought the S-Volt, or I bought the whatever, let's call it the ADC battery, and the suppliers tell me they use the power line protocol, so just go ahead and do this. If we haven't listed it, it means we haven't tested it. But if your supplier tells you they have, you're more than welcome to select the lithium function and to use whichever protocol they tell you. But if you don't have satisfactory results, meaning that your charge current limit is limited, or the discharge current limit is there are limitations on that, or you have delays in switching time, it simply means that it is BMS related. And then you might have to go to a lead acid setting. Lead acid setting is not, it doesn't mean lead acid like the old car truck batteries. It simply means a non-lithium battery. I find no problem working with the lead acid battery because it allows us to work with voltage control, which is extremely accurate, okay? We've seen on some brands, we've actually coined the phrase, I didn't coin it, but somebody has coined the phrase of SOC drift. So SOC drift is basically, if you have a look, let's go to the data page. And I'm going to show you an example on data history. Shut this down. Here on the history data, we can see the VBAT here, which is the voltage that it's picking up across the terminal. So, on your inverter, you've got the battery terminals, the positive and the negative, and this is the nominal voltage, the actual sample voltage that we're picking up there. And then if you slide it across to here, you will see the VBAT inverter voltage, which is your BMS voltage. Okay, so we need to see these two very, very close to each other. You could have an installation where you have the SOC sitting at 100%, but the battery voltage is sitting at, this one should be at 53.6. It could be that the battery voltage is sitting at 53.6 volts, but the SOC is displaying as 80. And then the next day it's 79, and the next day it's 78, and every day it drops a percentage. We've seen it with Dynes, we've seen it with CFE, we've seen it with a couple of other brands, and I'm not naming and shaming you, but I'm just giving you an example because we're all installers in a community and we should know this. And simply all you need to do then is, and Volta as well, you simply need to contact your battery supplier and ask them if there's an update patch for the BMS, and they can come out and do it for you. They'll either send you the firmware and the BMS tool, or they will physically send a technician to come out and do it. And obviously, if you're using a Hino, then there's no need for that because all of that can be done through the LuxpowerTek app. But that's an example of what happens with SOC drift. Okay, so let's just go back to the chat so that we can ask the questions. All right, so Johannes, I'm hoping that we have answered your question. If the battery is not on the list, would it create issues? Yes, it could possibly, but that's your risk, okay? And Jonathan wants to know, may I get clarity on the difference between 385 volts and 480 volts that is mentioned on the SNA 5K? Which one of the two should I be mindful of when I'm adding panels to my system? Is it one for panels VOC and another for VMP, or is it one for per the MPPT and another for the bridge? When I ask from the Lux support groups, it just caused a lot of debate. Okay, so you must remember that we do issue two voltages. So one is the maximum MPPT voltage range, and the other one is the operating voltage range. So typically, when you have a panel, if you look at the specifications of the panel will have an open circuit voltage. So the VOC, the rated voltage, it could be 48 volts, it could be 50 volts, but let's just work on a 48 volt VOC. It's open circuit. It means that the circuit is not closed. In other words, there is no load across the circuit, okay? So if you measure the potential difference across there, so you took a solar panel, a single one, and you put it in the sun, and the MPPT, I mean, the MC4 connectors are not connected to anything. They're not connected to, they're just sort of dangling there. And you took your leads on your tester and you measured the potential difference between the two. And the conditions are clear. You've got the panel angled at 33 degrees and the sun is great and it's a nice cool day, you get 48 volts. The minute you close the circuit, in other words, you put resistance across the circuit and you draw power, which means the amps will go up, the voltage will come down. So on the MPPT, we rate the maximum voltage, and then we have the operating voltage as well. So you should be mindful of, and I'm going to just clarify that with our sheet, don't exceed the 385 volts operating under load. So typically you're going to have to look at, so the MPPT is it's a 6.6 kilowatt, 6.6 kilowatt MPPT. So we have 3.3 on MPPT 1 and 3.3 kilowatts on MPPT 2. And then we have the rated current and the voltage. So you should, when you are speccing or designing your system, make sure that if you're stringing your panels, look at the design of the panels. Don't exceed the short circuit current or the rated current of 13 amps or 15 amps. Don't exceed the 380 volts in your string. And then you should, and obviously with the 3.3 kilowatts as well. So you mentioned in your question here about the about bridging your strings. You can do that, and what you can do then is you're going to take, since you put up your 6.6 kilowatts of ED. Now, I never recommend, I never advise clients to use the full range, purely because you must remember that our MPPT can take 6.6 kilowatts, but we've allowed for the peak power at 6.6. So what happens if it is in the middle of winter, the ambient temperature is 5 degrees outside, you're in De Aar or you're in Bloemfontein, and the air temperature is very low, but it's a crisp, clear day. So in other words, we've got the perfect conditions for spiking, low ambient temperature, and the panels are angled perfectly, and it's a crystal clear day. And then you get your solar irradiance is fantastic, and now all of a sudden your voltage spikes up and it exceeds the range of the MPPT. So if you had put up 6.6, then the chances of you exceeding that and going into an overload on your voltage bus is high. So I always recommend that, and this is just my personal choice, you don't have to follow that, but I always go 10% less than what the design rate is. So if it's 6.6, take 10% off, take 600 watts off, and then maximize it at 6 kilowatts maximum. So put in 3 kilowatts and 3 or 3.2, whatever the case may be. And it just simply means that for that 1 or 2 days, or the slight chance that you might have a spike, that your design has compensated for that. Okay. All right, Andre wants to know, S-volt batteries, which number do we use? Andre, I'm not particularly sure. I don't know the answer to that one. I suspect that somebody on the group here will know, guys that are using S-volt. I haven't personally used S-volt, so I'm not going to chance it and hazard a guess there, but we will get an answer for you. Right, so Johannes wants to know example shot of 5.12 kilowatt lithium. Okay, so all right, so yeah, that's Johannes is just adding on to his previous question, right? Yeah. So the Shotto works on Shotto has dip switches, which you have to set correctly, and then it'll also work on the Powerline protocol. MP Solar wants to know, can I get clarification on battery SOC not reading at 100%? However, the voltage is set to the specs of the battery. SOC should show battery charged 89%. Setting the voltage high gives an error of bus voltage high and using the Shotto. Yeah, we have seen this. So the first thing I would recommend you do is first get the battery's BMS resolved. I know Herman from Shotto in Pretoria, He is on one or two of the chat groups. He will be able to assist you with that. And I think we discussed it earlier on with the drift, with the SOC drift. We have seen it, and the solution lies with resolving the issue on the BMS. Okay, Rian says we have sites where the time on the inverter runs 2 hours behind. You can set it today, but tomorrow it's again 2 hours behind. All on Africa clusters cause the problems and setting according to time. Okay, Rian, I did cover this in the beginning. So what you're going to do is go to the configuration section like this, right? And then you're going to look for your station. And I'm going to use my personal ones. I'm going to go here, number 12. I'll search for it. It comes up. There it is. And then all I do is you go to station management here and you go edit. And this is where your machine gets its time from. So make sure that you've selected the continent of Africa, Southern Africa, South Africa, and here is the critical one. Make sure that it is GMT +2 and disable the daylight saving time. We do not have daylight saving time yet. You disable it, you click update. If you're going to the section here, if you're updating your time here, as I mentioned earlier on in the first few minutes of the training session, this will only change it until the dongle goes to fetch. The dongle reports data back again, and it'll simply report back the GMT time that's been set on the server. So yeah, your solution is going to the config and changing it there, disabling the daylight saving. All right, so Rian, inverter gives feedback even in off-grid mode. We've measured max 14 volts AC, normally between 3 and 5. Some prepaid meter trip. Because of that, can I set a buffer on the inverter to let the prepaid pass through a certain amount of watts to not see feedback? Yes, you can. So the first thing you're going to do, obviously, is make sure that you have your bonding correctly, which is what we've discussed. And then the other thing is you're going to go down here and you're going to set your, I just need to move this chat out of the way. You make sure that your export is set to 0, and also disable if there are no solar panels, like in this particular case here. I've disabled the PV and the hybrid function, so the machine runs during these times. It runs as an on-grid machine all the time, and the export is set to 0. You can make sure of that, and then I just want to see if we have CT offset in the SNA. No, we don't. Okay, so if it was an LXP range, then you could have set your CT offset to a negative value. But obviously, because the SNA doesn't have a CT, so we won't have that. Yeah, so I would make sure about the bonding and then make sure that this is set to 0. Yeah, I want to see if we have the range is from 0 to 100. Sorry, Rian, I'm not sure if that's going to resolve your problem. I know that with certain meters like the what's the favorite name? The one that we've got here in Cape Town. They have a problem with those, and then you can get them with. You can set you actually have to change the meter to one that allows a little bit of leak current. What number can we use on the BSL battery? BSL, we would have to go to the list. Let me see if I can pull up the list on the Rian question. I don't particularly have the battery list on hand, but let's have a look. I'm going to call it up in a while. It's looking for that. We're going to continue to the next question. If I have 2 SNA running in parallel, only one of the inverters connected to panels with the inverter without panel input. That panel input always supply power from the grid or battery? Yes. So the one, obviously, if you've paralleled them, so I need to know if you parallel them, so they've got the EPS output is paralleled, and you're also having a shared battery, but only PD going into one of them, then yes, then input always supply power from the grid or battery. Yes, so that one in an off-grid situation, that the one will run off battery, and the one with PV will run with PV and battery. Any reason why some installers are recommending bridging the MPPTs when the PV1 IC is higher than the inverters manufactured IC? Yes. So the reason they're doing that is if you go to, I'm going to check and see if we've got any, if the list has come up yet. No. Sorry, I just had to mute some people. We had noise coming through. Oh, the conlog. Yeah, that's right, Rion. That is the installer's favorite one, the conlog, the dreaded conlog. Okay, so to answer the other question, if we go here, you can set your MPPT. MPPT is connected to the same string. That will give you a higher, you can connect 6.6 kilowatts to, so you're going to use your positive and your negative. The negative you don't have to bridge, because the negative we bridge inside the machine, but the positive you can bridge across to the other side, and then it will share the power input between the two MPPTs, all right? This part here about the ISC, I'm not sure about. I'm not convinced about that, because our MPPT rating is peak 20 amps, but max continuous 13 or 15. So I'm not sure what panels or what brand of panels you consider using and what the current is there. But I can advise you that our MPPT has a limit, peak current for a very short time of 20 amps, and then obviously continuous 13. Right, Rian says AC input measures 223, but the inverter read 280 on the output. This question is, the AC input measures 223 volts, but the inverter read 280 on the input, and keep switching output on and off. Okay, so what I understand from your question here is you're saying that if you physically measure the nominal voltage on the AC input, it's 223, but we are sampling 280 volts on the input. Then it is a sampling error on the inverter, and it has to come in for repairs, because what I'm assuming is that you are going, if we look here on the data, we can either go to the chart on the AC side. So this here, the voltage on the AC side incoming. So you're saying that here it's picking up 280 volts. But the actual voltage, if you measure the root mean square voltage, or the potential difference with a multimeter, you get 223. Yes, then it is a problem with the sampling, and it needs to come in for repairs. Okay, so that is it for the questions. It is now 10:48. We have 12 minutes left. I'm not going to squeeze in much more than this, because typically the guys are asking for more detailed things. So next week, we're going to be running a training session on the LXP, but we're also going to be running training on setting dongles for the old dongle, the old longer one, and then obviously the new Bluetooth dongle. And then while I've still got some time left, I'm going to chat to you guys about a very popular request that comes through on the tech support line, and that is where guys are asking us to wipe dongles or reset dongles or clear dongles. Okay, I'm going to log out of here and I'm going to log into an installer account so that I can see what the installers can see. Yes, I'm assuming you guys can still see. Yeah, you can still see it. All right. So if you are, as an installer, if you have done an installation or you've created a station and you've used the dongle and it's incorrect and you want to change it, installers with dongles, so in other words, this installer here, Mr. Broomhead, if he clicks on dongles, all of these dongles that are on the Africa server under his name, can change them. He can, you can go in here, you can edit the dongle. You can do it. You can do edits yourself as an installer, and you can also reset dongles. So we have a typical request where they ask for the dongles to be wiped so that it can be reprogrammed. So if you are an installer, you can work on dongles that belong to you. You can reset dongles, and you must remember the function here, the remove function. You can remove dongles. Now the dongle has to be unplugged. So if I see all these question marks, they're not picking up. But if I go to the Asia server, then they should all show up connected. Right, so these are all the dongles that are connected on the Asia server, right? If I, for instance, if he goes to House Rugby and he wants to change the dongle, he's made a mistake with something, and he says, "Oh, bugger it, I'm just going to reset the dongle." As an installer, if the dongle appears on your list, you can do it yourself. You simply go, you need to unplug the dongle and make sure that it reports as not connected. You can then go here and you can remove it. Every time you guys send in a request to our tech support line and you ask us to remove dongles or reset dongles or wipe dongles, this is what we do. We simply come in and we remove them here. But the reason we can do it is because tech support, LuxpowerTek support has global, or not global, they have a regional view on all the stations in the Africa region. So if you're a distributor, it simply means that you've got a higher level up and you can do all of the dongles that are under you. All right. I want to encourage you guys, if you've made a mistake with the dongle, you can edit it. You can edit the information on there, or if you want to remove it and it appears on your list, you simply unplug it, go here, and go to the remove. Once you remove it, then this here will change to that. It'll have Chinese writing on it, K-A-G-K, and some Chinese letters. All right, guys. So that it comes to the end of today's session. Next week we're going to be doing the LXP5. I will unfortunately not be here, but Enrico will be doing it, and we're going to set up the curriculum for next week. And I encourage you to send in some questions. Let us know what it is in particular that you want to see, and then we will address those questions first. Okay. So I'm going to see if I can just make sure that everybody, I don't want to make sure that I have answered all of the questions. Got one more question in the chat. Will the recording be available? Yes, it will be available. One of our ladies at head office, she is recording the session, and they will either post it on a link on the group or they will put it on the YouTube. All right, everybody, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for joining in. I've kept it short and sweet, just 1 hour. Next week, we're doing LXP5. And if there are any particular things that you'd like us to cover, send us an email or pop it in the chat groups, and we will be sure to cover it. Okay, thanks, guys. Goodbye.